Welcome to Future Foodcast. I'm Pam Miller, your host. Today, we are going to talk all about the intersection of food, climate, and agriculture. I'm excited to have our guest, Elizabeth Candelario. She is the Chief Strategy Officer for MAD Agriculture. Welcome to the show, Elizabeth.
Thank you for having me, Pam. I'm excited to have this conversation today.
Oh, me too. You have such a great background and a history to bring to these topics. So why don't you tell us all about MAD Agriculture? What happens there? I
Well,
love
thank
the name,
you.
first of all.
Yeah, we do too. And I'll tell you about the name. So in Mad Agriculture, our mission is nothing less than to create a regenerative revolution in agriculture. We really favor revolution over reform. We feel that change really comes from the margins. So that's really what we focus on. That's where we spend our time and energy. And the name Mad Agriculture and our whole organization is inspired by the wonderful American agrarian saint and poet Wendell Berry. Many of your listeners are probably familiar with Wendell Berry. And he really he wrote a series of mad farmer poems in the 1970s that really call us to reimagine our relationship with each other and with the earth. So I would say that's the inspiration for MAD. We really believe that if we are going to reimagine our relationship between people and planet, agriculture is really the nexus of that. It's really where the health of ourselves and our planet come together and can be almost seen as one and the same thing. So our goal at MAD Agriculture is really to help stewards of the earth transition and thrive in regenerative agriculture. And so we work with farmers as agents of change. I like to say to people that you can think of Mad Agriculture and our two sister companies, which I'll tell you about, like a Swiss Army knife, designed to specifically help farmers overcome the obstacles that they face transitioning out of industrial, largely GMO agriculture into regenerative organic farming.
Okay. Wow, that is a big mission out there. And I know you're a nonprofit organization, or the One Arm is a nonprofit organization, right? You've been around for several years doing this work. But what is your background that you brought to this? Because you've been involved in this kind of work for a long time.
Oh, thank you so much. I have been involved in this work for a while. I actually was in the wine industry for many years. But I like to say that being in the wine industry is a little bit like having dessert for dinner. It's fun, but it's not very filling. And so what would happen is I'd jump out of the wine industry to work in nonprofit. I really love projects that bring nonprofits and for-profits together to really solve challenges and create some mutual support. But then I'd have to get my kids' health insurance. I go back in the wine industry. So my career for 20 years was like that. I was in the wine industry. I was doing a lot of nonprofit work. But about 16 years ago, I went to work as marketing director for a winery in Sonoma County, Northern California, as marketing director. And at that winery, we were doing a creek restoration to restore the steelhead and salmon habitat, and felt like we were just, there was a bit of a philosophical disconnect because we weren't organic certified. So we hired a consultant named Alan York to help us get our NOP certification. And Alan said, you shouldn't stop at organic, you all should be biodynamic. And we were all like, bio what? And didn't know what that is. And for those listeners who don't know of the term biodynamic, you can think of it almost as the original white man's regenerative agriculture. It's uber organic standard, and it's really predominant in Europe and certainly in the American wine industry. So we did that. We on a leap of faith, decided to pursue biodynamic principles and practices on the estate. And honestly, over the 5 years that I worked there, I felt a merging of my career in the wine business and my interest in social mission, because not only did we see a tremendous transformation of the health and vitality of the estate, but we also really saw a transformation in the people who worked there and the connection that the estate had with our customers. And so when I decided at that point to really dive into regenerative ag, biodynamic agriculture, and went to work for an organization called Demeter, which is actually the oldest ecological certification organization in the world, started in Germany. Over the course of 11 years, I retired as president of Demeter USA, and that preceded my work coming to work for Mad Agriculture.
Wow. And then you brought all that experience and passion to Mad Agriculture, and you're trying to essentially help farmers, right, that are wanting to work in regenerative agriculture, be commercialized, I guess, be viable, share what you do.
Sure, Pam. I'd love to dive into that a little bit more.
Yeah.
Thanks. Well, first of all, Mad Agriculture was founded about 6 years ago by a man named Philip Taylor, who is a biogeochemist, PhD, and he had worked in agriculture on 5 continents, but then really was working in academia for a number of years, including then here in Boulder at the University of Colorado Boulder in their master's environmental studies program, and really wanted to get back to work on farms and was very interested in helping farmers, as I've said, really transition into more regenerative agriculture. So he started Mad Agriculture really focused on land and business planning for farmers. As I said, really helping, seeing farmers as agents of change. And so today, Mad Agriculture has a land and business team, and we do basically ecological and financial consulting with farmers, helping them to realize their own vision of their land, asking them, what do you want this farm to be? What does the land need us to be? In Mad Agriculture, we also have a science team that puts boots on the ground on farms and really seeks to measure the impacts of regenerative organic agriculture so that we can really put the science behind the work that we do. We also have a wonderful media team. If anybody has ever spent time on our website or looked at Mad Agriculture on YouTube, and I know we'll have some of these links in your show notes, you'll see that we're very good at telling the stories of the farmers that we work with. But then about 3.5 years ago, Mad recognized another obstacle that these farmers were facing, and that was access to capital. I mean, there's really 2 ways that money comes into a farm. It's either from the crops that the farmer is selling or from capital to support the farms. And traditional financing is really not set up. It doesn't really understand, not agriculture specifically, but organic agriculture. And so in 2019, Mad Agriculture launched Mad Capital, which really is a farmer forward finance company. And it's specifically designed for farmers that are transitioning to organic and are NOP certified. As of February of this year, Mad Capital's deployed over $25 million to 30 farmers. We've helped transition over 10,500 acres of land to organic and growing our portfolio of acres by about 26% a year. So huge need, great strategy for addressing that obstacle of financing. Then I'll say one more thing. It's a long story, Pam. Thank you for letting me get it all out. The reason I was hired and a gentleman named Alex Heilman was the third obstacle that was really recognized was access to market. So as I said, money comes to a farm 2 ways: through capital that they achieve through financing, but also through markets and selling their crops. So we developed and launched Mad Markets really to connect the farms we were working with to the marketplace. It was a lot of my work at Demeter, very passionate about using the American marketplace as a lever to drive adoption of regenerative agriculture. And so Alex and I started working with CPG companies, national food companies that really wanted to develop more regenerative supply chains. what happened in that work is we quickly realized that there's a missing middle. You know, we could say that supply chains are broken. They're not broken. They're set up specifically to service commodity crops. And so we really need to rebuild or build infrastructure to support regenerative crops. And so at Mad Markets, recognizing that we couldn't really do that without controlling the middle. And so about 3 months ago, we launched Mad Markets, also as a public benefit corp, just like Mad Capital, to begin to purchase infrastructure so that we could become the go-to ingredients platform for regenerative organic ingredients. And we announced last month the purchase of Timeless Seeds, which is a storied lentil and chickpea processor in Montana. And when you think about that, what we've done basically with that purchase is collapse the supply chain so that we have the farmers we're working with, we have the processor, and then we have the CPG companies. This not only aids the farmers in accessing markets, but enables us to address a lot of the needs of food companies that really are starting to need direct sight lines through their supply chain to address their own goals around environment, around ESG, around scope 3. So we're really, really excited about that acquisition and that launch as well. So the Mad Universe now is 3 companies, 2 public benefit corps, and the 501c3. My work as Chief Strategy Officer is to work across our value offerings and with our partners out there to really affect systems change in food and agriculture.
Yeah, well, there is a lot going on there at MAD. Like you said, the MAD universe. I love how you called it that, because that's really what you're doing, is trying to, well, you're not trying to, you did identify the obstacles to achieving the end goals that you're looking to provide support for, and you're providing solutions for those. And so that's how it seems like you're growing organically, no pun intended, as you see the needs and how to fill them. So let's break that down a little bit, because that missing middle, like you said, supply chain, I think before we had the pandemic, maybe a lot of normal, average, everyday people in the world did not really pay any attention to the supply chain, what it meant, how it affected them. They just went to the store and bought things. However, when it was interrupted by challenges worldwide, then people started to say, they heard about supply chain, the challenges that were happening in the supply chains, and food in particular, because everyone is affected by that. So the fact that you're able to get in and see where the challenges are there, that you might be able to affect positive change and give alternatives, is great. The other thing is, there's a lot more conversation right now around the whole regenerative topic. Companies are looking for sourcing from farmers who are farming using regenerative technologies is not necessarily the right word, but regenerative practices. And so you're able to bring those together. And I mean, that's just a lot of good work that's happening for those that are interested in pursuing these end goals. I mean, that you have so much happening there, but you're also, I do want to define, I mean, we have on another podcast, but that public benefit organization, 2 of your 3 organizations are public benefit corporations. Could you explain that real quick for our listeners?
It's almost like a nonprofit and a for-profit had a baby.
Okay.
What happens in public benefits is they have to be driven by a particular vision and mission that has a public benefit purpose. And in terms of our 3 companies, we share the same vision and the same mission, but they are for-profit models within that, which when you get into the world of finance and you get into the world of processing, we found that a for-profit model was a better fit for what we were trying to accomplish.
Yeah, definitely. I know, I just wanted to get that definition out there for some of our newer listeners that might not know what that is, because that's an important distinguishing factor from just plain, a regular corporation. I mean, it's a special designation that you have to meet certain qualifications to achieve and to categorize yourself that way. So that's really important. But in addition to what you're doing, all that you just explained, you're also getting involved in policy work.
Yes, well, I wouldn't say that we're getting involved in policy work because there's lots of folks that are really good at that. But we did recognize that because we work on farm, we can actually potentially provide tools and information for policymakers and advocates of regenerative agriculture. And so we recently got a USDA grant to really tell the story of how USDA conservation funding is channeling onto US farms and what that looks like. So just at Climate Week in New York, 2 months ago now, we launched a program called Cultivating Conservation. And basically it's a toolkit for policymakers and I would say activists that want to ensure that USDA funding channels to American farms and really tell the story of the good work that's doing. The USDA kind of has this alphabet soup of conservation programs, EQIP, CRP, CSP, ACE. It totals about $60 billion over the past 10 years, a significant portion of the funds that are invested in conservation agriculture come from the USDA, which is why we want to be able to talk about it. We want people to know about it. We want farmers to know about it. About 967 million is coming specifically from the Inflation Reduction Act. Not all of that is going to be guaranteed to be paid out with this change of administration. And certainly on the farm level, selling crops doesn't pay the farmer for the cost of these conservation practices. So it's really important to emphasize the impact of these programs on these farms, which is substantial, but often underreporting. So what this toolkit does is provide charts and graphs showing where that money went. And then also there's 10 farmer stories that tell the stories of the farmers that have benefited from these dollars, which is probably the most compelling part because we can all look at stats and statistics, but when you hear it from the farmers themselves, it really makes a difference. So again, cultivating conservation, and we'll put the link to that toolkit online, and it includes a media kit for those that are interested.
Great. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. I think you're right. The stories of the farmers and the impact that has been made is really what people are going to be able to relate to. And then we do need the statistics. We do still need the numbers, which you're providing some of those that are impacting policy, that are working with the policymakers to try to affect change and the money to go where you need it to go. I mean, just working at that level. So thanks for that clarification there. I appreciate that. But you're also working with brands out there, certain brands. I know you had mentioned Whole Foods before, and there's a great story to be told with your partnership with them.
Yes. We're so fortunate to have the opportunity to work with a lot of really fantastic American food companies, or food companies that are at least based here in the US. And retailers as well. But let me back up, and I want to tell a little bit about a project we're working on that I'm very excited about. So probably most of your listeners have heard about the 30 by 30 initiative. And what that is a global conservation effort that aims to protect 30% of Earth's land and ocean areas by 2030. It's kind of nested in Paris, the Paris Agreement. It really represents a significant global commitment to conservation. And so we have to ask ourselves, with agriculture covering so much of the terrestrial landmass, how does 30 by 30 really fit? And I would say that at MAD, we are absolutely mad about rewilding portions of American farmland. And the reason is because even in regenerative agriculture, annual crops do not sequester carbon. I mean, regenerative agricultural practices can effectively cycle carbon, but they don't really, the soil doesn't really capture it and hold on to it for the long term. But farms are much more than production fields. I mean, they can include riparian areas, oak groves, lakes, marshes, forests, meadows, a whole bunch of beautiful wild space. And we can add to that biodiversity by adding perennial plants like trees and hedgerows and prairie strips. So one of the things that we really love, because we tend to work a lot with Midwestern farmers, farms that are 200 to 20,000 acres that are transitioning out of GMO ag, as I've talked about, into regenerative ag. So prairie strips are really, they're linear perennial plantings of prairie grasses and wildflowers that are strategically integrated into row crop fields. And what they do is they strengthen the productivity and resilience of farmland, and by extension, really, supply chains. And they're absolutely beautiful addition to any agricultural landscape. So what we like to say to our farmers and to the brands and retailers that we work with is, hey, you don't harvest crops from fields. We're really harvesting crops from ecosystems. And the truth is, thinking outside the field, outside those production areas, are where we can really make big environmental change. So Whole Foods came to us and they had goals in they had certain ESG and environmental goals that they wanted to meet, but they didn't want to have carbon tunnel vision. It was really important to them to invest in programs that really helped farms. And more than that, even perhaps farms in their own supply chain. So that caused us to kind of walk through the aisles of Whole Foods, identify brands where we could identify farms that they're sourcing from, and then go to those farms and work with the farmers to install prairie strips on their farms. So this year, 2024, is our first pilot year. We have 4 farms across 3 states, and we're putting 120 acres of prairie strips on these farms. And this is just our first step. Next year, we're launching a much broader program to look at farms across the United States to really focus on encouraging these farms to basically wild them, to install these perennial plantings like prairie strips and really grow their farm's ability to be resilient, that they make them more beautiful, and also to start sequestering, really truly sequestering carbon on American farmland.
Great. And I'm sure you're going to gather all the analytics based on this as far as what you can figure out from what's happening with the soil and other areas on the farm to be able to, again, have some of those statistics to share once you get through this pilot. And for a timestamp, we are recording this. I know things live out on the internet forever, Elizabeth. So we are recording this in December of 2024. So depending on when you're listening to this, please check back with the Mad Universe to find out what the latest might be. But things are definitely moving in a positive direction. You have a lot of activity happening, and a lot of the work you do is just reaping benefits across, and some of the partnerships like with Whole Foods, certainly being able to see out some of the mission that you're looking to do and Whole Foods is looking to achieve as well. Is there anything else that's happening in the Mad Universe that you'd like to share with our audience before we go, Elizabeth?
Well, you've given me so much opportunity to share the work, the important work that we're doing. I'm so grateful for that, Pam. Thank you. I just really want to emphasize that when we're thinking about climate solutions, that if we just focus on water quality or we just focus on carbon sequestration, we're not going to get there. What we really want to focus on is holistic climate solutions, not individually delivering on carbon or on pollinators or on water. What we really want to do is create positive feedback loops. Perennialization increases carbon sequestration. Carbon sequestration in soil improves soil health. It makes the plants healthier. It improves water filtration and aeration. It creates this inviting habitat for pollinators, for birds and wildlife. So what I'm trying to say here is when we're thinking about regenerative agriculture, it's really important to think holistically across the whole farm ecosystem and really use nature as our teacher and plants and animals as our tools.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. Thank you to our audience for listening in on this episode. Please subscribe if you don't want to miss the next one, and leave us comments, your thoughts about our topic here today. We appreciate your listenership, and until next time, I'm Pam Line-Miller.
Thanks for listening to Future Foodcast. Future Foodcast is powered by Farm to Plate, the leading food blockchain platform. Subscribe on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts to stay up to date with the very latest innovations in the food industry.